To your left, Civilization VI. To your right, it's Humankind. Both are 4X yield-driven strategy games with hex tiles that we've all come to know and love, or at least you will. But in this video, I'm going to tell you about my 3 key differences between Civilization VI and Humankind. But first, let's cover them off. For starters, we have Humankind, the much more newer of the two, August 17th, 2021, its initial release date. Humankind, made by Amplitude Studios, the development studio behind Endless Legend and other Endless games. In Humankind, you choose a culture, like this one, with an emblematic unit and a quarter. There are 6 eras with 10 cultures, except for the nomads at the start. Humankind is a more wide-reaching experience, and within it you establish cities and territories and capture the map that we grow and love. Civilization VI, a little bit different. Civilization VI came out in 2016 across a myriad of platforms. Its last one was actually Android as of 2020. Civilization VI is a different experience, and it's had all of that DLC to play with, right? It's had the new Frontier Pass, it's had Gathering Storm, it's had Rise and Fall. It's a fully fledged, now 5-year-old game, but I still think we can draw some comparisons between the two because obviously Civilization VI and Humankind are very, very similar. For starters, let's talk combat. I'm going to discuss ways in which actually they're very, very different. In Civilization VI, you can see combat here, it's relatively simple. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing. Units take up a tile, there are support units and aggressive units, and they fight each other. It's a point and click. There is some strategy around positioning units and flanking bonuses, but by and large, it's a relatively simple combat system. Now, Humankind's, on the other hand, let me show you it now on screen, is quite different. When you enter a battle in Humankind, you enter a sort of sub-zone on the map. You can see it sort of drawn out here, the sort of white borders on the map where all of these units are. Aggressors and defenders take turns in attacking over a period of 3 rounds each. Combat bonuses are really clearly displayed at the bottom of the screen, and you can really get into the combat. Yet it's surprisingly simple to learn thanks to its helpful UI and overall pretty good presentation. Humankind's combat is therefore both simple and strategic, and that's what separates it from Civilization VI's somewhat more straightforward, dare I say, a little outdated combat system. By and large, aside from the addition of combining the same unit into an army or a corps and some more support units, Civilization's combat hasn't really changed much since really the beginning of Civ. Granted, it did change a bit from Civ 4 to 5, where we moved from squares to hexes and some slight advancements, but by and large, it's the same combat we've been dealing with throughout. Now, Humankind's isn't the saving grace of combat either, and one of the things that has me a little concerned about it is the differences between auto-resolve and manually resolving the combat. I'm not sure how this will necessarily play out for newer players. I'm also unsure about the ramifications on multiplayer. Can all multiplayer people in the lobby see this battle? Do they need to see the battle? Is Civilization's method of combat better in that it's a simple point and click? Does that suit multiplayer better? Now, I know multiplayer isn't what everyone plays, but it's important that we consider these things when we're evaluating Civilization VI and Humankind. The next big thing for me that I'd like to discuss is actually how we play the game. You can see me here in Civilization VI playing as Canada, establishing my cities wherever I want. Now, I'm a little restricted by loyalty and my enemies, but I can do what I please. In Humankind, you can see that it's actually a very different experience. Take a look at this map. You can see pre-drawn boundaries along it. These territories are prescribed from the beginning of the game. So unlike Civilization VI's more free model, where aside from some gameplay mechanics such as loyalty, you can really go as you please, settle where you please. Do you want 1 city or 10? Do you want your city's borders to be massive by buying a whole load of tiles to pick up that resource? Or do you want to keep a quaint, tall city? That's up to you as a player. Now, in Humankind, as I say, we are limited by these blue borders, these territorial boundaries. However, it comes with some upsides. For example, in Humankind, we explore the map in a very different way. We establish a colony with our nomadic unit, and that colony, that outpost, as it's called, can then turn into a city. Neighbouring outposts can connect to cities as they grow, share in their production, their yields, so on and so forth. While it is a more restricted system geographically, it's a more detailed system at its whole. It takes Civilization VI's city centres and a few districts, with some gamification around it, to the extreme, in a good way. You have a whole territory to play with, and you don't have to have every single resource within that territory right next to your city or within 3 tiles of your city to work it. You can have different sectors. You can build your districts where you please. It makes sense, and it feels more historically accurate, mainly because, and this is a broad assumption that isn't always true, but is probably true around 80% of the time, Humankind's map boundaries broadly align with geography, in the same way that real-world boundaries broadly align with geography. Now, granted, historians and politicians of human history haven't been the best at drawing boundaries on a map, but indeed the boundaries that we've found ourselves, the boundaries that we've found as cultures and as people, tend to follow rivers, mountains, coastlines, those kind of features. And as you'll see, Humankind's broadly do that as well. But there's more to the world that we play in than just territories and boundaries. We also have to consider what the actual world looks like and how we interact with that. Now, in Humankind, as you can see, it's quite a detailed map with lots of levels and scales. You can see shallow coast distinct from ocean, so distinct that your units actually fatigue and die if they're out in the ocean for too long in the early game. Like, it really matters. It's not like Civilizations. Some boats can go in this water and some boats can go in them all. In Humankind, it's like, well, you can go out there, but you're going to have a bad time. I like it. It's more flexible and more realistic. You can see me struggling here as I zoom around the world to try and figure out where to put my pyramids. This isn't a dumb decision. Look at all those different layers. I was moving those pyramids across 4 or 5 different topographic layers within the map, from minor hills to big cliff sides right up to mountains. Humankind's geography is distinct and very different, and I think, to be honest, beats out Civilization VI's. Valleys and plateaus are extreme. Plateaus give you beautiful views over the map, whereas valleys restrict you to almost no vision. These geographical landmarks and features matter. However, Civilization VI, in its 5 years through its DLC lifecycle, granted, has made its map more dynamic in natural disasters in particular. I'm thinking Gathering Storm, I'm thinking sea level rise, I'm thinking volcanoes, floods, so on and so forth. These things that unfortunately we are facing more and more and more as real people in the real world. But actually, it's quite refreshing to face them in-game. It adds not only an element of randomness, but also something to plan around, and something to use to your advantage as well, with the full DLC Anthology and Civilization VI. There are some really fun things to play through, and I think even though Humankind's world is more geographically diverse and unique and distinct, Civilization does a pretty good job with its sort of natural features, and that's something that I'd like to see Humankind develop as it goes on. Back over to Civilization VI's Quebec City in my my Canada playthrough. It brings me to my last point, which is content and civs. Okay, so we've talked about combat, we've talked about the world, but actually, who am I playing as, right? And as I say, here I'm playing as Canada. I picked Canada at the start. They had a unique tile improvement, their ice hockey rink, a unique building, and a start bias heavily catered towards the snow. That makes sense. It's historically accurate. There's enough flexibility within them that I can kind of play the game how I want, but if I'm playing at higher difficulties, I'm probably going to have to stick to broadly a victory condition pathway that they're good at. In their case, it's culture. You can see the culture yields from my ice hockey rinks from here. I dare say jealous Mexicans south of the border are looking at my culture yields and thinking, dang, that's some good culture as well. I digress. Humankind does it completely differently. You start off as a roaming nomadic tribe. You don't have a choice. That's it. You're a nomad. That's the first era. But then the next 6 eras are distinct from that. In the next 6, you choose a culture, 1 of 10 throughout each era. That's 60 in total. You can choose to change your culture, or you can choose to keep it the same. It's up to you. What I really like about Humankind's model here, and how it's distinctly different from not only Civilization VI, but all of Sid Meier's Civilization games, is that in Humankind, we can develop and grow just as Humankind did. If you are lucky enough to live some 5 or 10,000 years, that's the time span of a civilization and even more so a Humankind game, you would realize in real life that your culture and the world around you is going to change dramatically. Your unique building is not always going to be an ice hockey rink. Your unique unit is not always going to be, I don't know, Teddy Roosevelt. Right? These things change dramatically, and Humankind does a good job at capturing that. In the ancient era, you can play as the Phoenicians or the Romans, right the way through sort of early modern, industrial, and then into the contemporary era, where you can play as, say, industrial Britain, or right the way through to a modern civilization, a technological civilization, like modern-day Japan, for example. These changes allow a much more dynamic element of gameplay for Humankind. I've talked about this a great deal on my channel already, and if you'd like a better explainer of all of these things, I'd really recommend you head over and check it out. I have Humankind explainers, comparisons, so on and so forth. That concludes my discussion today. You will note that there are a few things I didn't cover. Civics trees and tech trees. Wonders. There are some minor differences between Humankind's tech tree and Civ's. Wonders, another good example. In Humankind, you claim them and no one else can before you build them. Whereas in Civilization, it's sort of a race for the wool, right? If you get it, great, good on you. I was halfway through it and now I'm left feeling a little disappointed, but at least I can put that production towards a library. My point being, these features don't dramatically differ, but in my view, the top 3 differences are most certainly combat, the world that you play in, and the civilization or culture and how that changes over time. Thank you very much for watching Civilization VI versus Humankind. As I say, if you did enjoy it, got plenty more content on the channel, why don't you pop on over and check it out. Other than that, that'll conclude this video. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next one.